What happened when betrayal came from the last person you expected? I never thought my life would unravel because of the person I trusted most. Not a stranger, not an enemy, but someone whose voice I once found comforting. Someone I thought would stand beside me forever. It started small, subtle, that even now, looking back, I wonder how I missed it. We were sitting at my parents' dining table on a Sunday night, the way we had for years. My older brother, Daniel, was telling one of his long-winded stories about work. My mother was laughing. My father's glass of whiskey caught the light just right, giving the whole scene that warm, familiar glow of family. And then she leaned over. My girlfriend, Emma. She put her hand on my father's arm, smiling just a little too long at something he said. It was innocent, I told myself. She was always friendly, always engaging. That was one of the things I loved about her, how she could make anyone feel seen. But that night, I felt something shift, something I couldn't name. When we left, she asked if everything was okay. I smiled and kissed her forehead. Of course I lied, but the truth lodged like a splinter under my skin. For weeks, it was nothing more than small moments. A glance across the table, my father offering her a drink before he asked if I wanted one, Emma laughing at one of his rare jokes like it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. Little things. Too little to mean anything on their own. But then there were the whispers. I overheard my mother on the phone one afternoon. Her voice sharp, urgent. She was in the kitchen, unaware I was lingering in the hallway. "You need to stop," she hissed. "It's disgusting." A pause. "Because if he finds out, it'll destroy everything." I stood frozen. Who was she talking to? Was it about me? About Emma? About Dad? My stomach twisted, and when I finally stepped into the kitchen, Mum snapped the phone shut and plastered on a smile. "Everything okay?" I asked carefully. She nodded. "Just work drama." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the next week, when I came home early from a late shift, I caught them in the living room. Emma and Dad. Not close enough to touch, but close enough to make my skin crawl. Their voices dropped the second I stepped in. Emma stood quickly, her face too flush, too guilty. Dad poured himself another drink like nothing had happened. "Hey," Emma said, forcing cheer into her voice. "We were just waiting for you." I tried to ignore the way my chest constricted, but the unease was louder than my own heartbeat. It wasn't until Daniel pulled me aside one night that my worst fears started to take shape. "You need to keep an eye on them," he said, his voice low, cautious. I frowned. "What do you mean?" Daniel glanced toward the hallway to make sure no one was listening. "Dad and Emma. Something's off. I've seen the way he looks at her, and she's not pushing him away." The room spun. I wanted to punch him for even suggesting it, but deep down, I already knew he was right. For days, I convinced myself it was paranoia. For weeks, I avoided looking too closely, terrified of what I might find. But once the seed was planted, it grew. Every smile between them looked sharper. Every laugh sounded like a betrayal. And then came the night everything cracked. I'd forgotten my phone charger at Emma's apartment. It was late, and she hadn't been answering my texts. So I decided to swing by unannounced. Her car was outside, lights on in the living room. I climbed the stairs quietly, rehearsing how I'd tease her for ignoring me. But the second I opened her door, the words died in my throat. My father was standing in her living room, his coat draped over the back of her chair, his glass of whiskey sitting on her table. Emma stood by the window, arms crossed, eyes wet with unshed tears. They both froze when they saw me. No one spoke, no one moved. My whole body went cold. "What the hell is this?" I finally choked out. Emma opened her mouth, but no words came. Dad stepped forward, his face carefully blank. "Son," he began, his voice calm, too calm. "You don't understand." And in that moment, I knew everything I'd tried to bury was real. The betrayal wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was standing right in front of me, wearing my father's face and my girlfriend's silence. My hands shook so badly I had to grip the doorframe just to stay upright. The people I loved most had destroyed me, and I hadn't even seen it coming. But that night was only the beginning, because betrayal doesn't end with discovery. That's when it truly begins. I wanted to scream, to throw every piece of furniture in that apartment through the window, to demand answers until their throats bled from trying to explain. But all I did was stand there, frozen. Emma stepped forward first, her voice trembling. "It's not what it looks like. Not what it looks like." The oldest line in the book. I laughed, a short, broken sound that didn't sound like mine. "Really?" "Because it looks like my father is drinking in my girlfriend's apartment at midnight, while she avoids my calls." Dad raised his hands as if calming down a suspect on the job. "Listen to me, son. Nothing happened. We were just talking." My stomach lurched. Talking. Midnight. No explanation for the whiskey, the flushed cheeks, the silence when I walked in. Emma tried again, her words spilling too fast. "He came over because he wanted to check on me. You know, I've been struggling lately." "It wasn't struggling," I snapped. "And you couldn't call me. Your boyfriend? You needed him?" Her eyes darted to my father, desperate, like she was silently asking him for help. And that was the nail in the coffin. "You're lying to me," I whispered, my voice cracked. "Both of you." No one said a word. The silence was worse than any admission. I left, slamming the door so hard the frame rattled, but the sound wasn't enough to drown out the chaos in my head. I drove until the gaslight came on, my hands white-knuckled around the wheel, tears blurring every streetlight into smears of gold. By the time I made it home, Mum was still awake, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of cold tea. She looked at me like she'd been waiting. "You know," she said softly. The world tilted. "You knew?" Her lips pressed tight. She didn't deny it. I sank into the chair across from her, shaking. "How long?" Her eyes glistened. "A few months." I thought it was nothing at first. Harmless flirting. Then I found out he was seeing her behind your back. I told him to stop. I begged him, my chest hollowed out. My own mother had begged my father not to betray me, and he'd done it anyway. "Why didn't you tell me?" I croaked. "Because," she whispered, staring at her tea like it held answers, "I knew it would destroy you." The betrayal wasn't just Emma, not just Dad. It was Mom too. She'd chosen silence, protecting him instead of me. I stumbled upstairs and locked myself in my room. For 2 days, I didn't answer calls. Emma left messages I couldn't bear to listen to. Daniel knocked on my door, urging me to talk. But what was there to say? The foundation of my entire life had cracked down the middle. On the 3rd day, I finally listened to Emma's voicemails. Her voice was raw, broken. "I'm sorry. Please, please believe me, it wasn't what you think." He came on to me, and I didn't know how to stop it without making things worse. "I should have told you sooner. I'm sorry. I love you. Please call me." Her words wrapped around my brain, twisting. Was she telling the truth? Or was she rewriting the story now that she'd been caught? I needed clarity, proof. So I went to Daniel. If anyone in the family had noticed, it would be him. He didn't hesitate. "I've seen the way he looks at her, man. It's not just in your head." "But Emma?" He trailed off, chewing his lip. "I think she's scared of him." That hit harder than I expected. My father wasn't just my father. He was a man used to authority. A man who didn't take no easily. If Emma felt trapped then, are you saying he forced her? I asked, my throat dry. Daniel sighed. "I'm saying I don't know. But I know, Dad. And I know you. And if you don't figure this out, it's going to eat you alive. He was right. That night, I drove back to Emma's apartment. My heart hammered as I knocked on her door, unsure if I wanted her to open it. She did. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her hair pulled into a messy knot. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "Can we talk?" I asked. She nodded silently, stepping aside. The apartment smelled like stale coffee and lavender candles. The whiskey glass was gone. My father's coat too. It looked like the scene of a crime scrubbed clean. "Tell me everything," I demanded. Her voice broke as she confessed. "He came on to me months ago. At first, I laughed it off, thought it was harmless. But then he started showing up when you weren't around. Saying things, touching my arm, standing too close. I didn't know how to tell you. I thought it would destroy you. And then last week," she trailed off, covering her face. My stomach clenched. "Last week what?" She shook her head, tears slipping through her fingers. I thought if I ignored him, it would stop. But he doesn't stop. The room spun. My father. The man I'd idolized. The man who taught me to ride a bike, to drive, to stand up for myself. He'd been circling the woman I loved like a predator. Did he? I couldn't finish the question. Emma looked at me through wet lashes. Not yet. But he will. The rage that flooded me was unlike anything I'd ever felt. Hot. Violent. Alive. I left her apartment without another word. Because if I stayed, I might have broken something or someone. When I got home, Dad was sitting in his armchair, whiskey in hand, watching the evening news like he hadn't detonated my entire life. I stood in the doorway, fists clenched, heart pounding. "Son," he said, not even looking at me. "We need to talk." Something inside me snapped. I don't remember walking into the living room. One second, I was standing in the doorway. The next, I was towering over him, my chest heaving, my fists clenched so tight, my nails dug half moons into my palms. "We need to talk." My voice came out raw, dangerous. "That's what you have to say to me." Dad set his glass down slowly, deliberately, like I was the one being unreasonable, like he was in control. "Sit down," he said, calm as a cop on the job. "Let me explain." "No." I took a step closer. "You don't get to explain. You don't get to look me in the eye and act like you didn't try to ruin everything I love." Finally, his eyes met mine. There was no shame there. No guilt. Just that same measured calm. "You're young. You don't see things clearly. Emma, she's not who you think she is." My stomach twisted. "Don't you dare." He leaned back, swirling the whiskey in his glass like this was a casual debate. "She flirts with everyone, son." She came on to me. "You've been too blinded to notice." The world tilted. I'd heard the same line from Emma, but in reverse. Who was lying? Who was twisting the truth? "You're disgusting," I spat. He raised his eyebrows, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "I'm telling you the truth. She wants attention. And you should be thanking me for showing you before you marry someone who'll destroy you." The calmness in his tone lit a fire under my skin. "You're my father," I snapped. "And she's my girlfriend. Even if you believe that, even if you thought she was coming on to you, you should have protected me. Protected her." "Not," my voice cracked. "Not this." For the first time, something flickered across his face. Not guilt, not regret, but irritation. "Watch how you speak to me." The same phrase he'd used when I was 12 and had refused to clean the garage. When I was 15 and questioned his rules. A command, not advice. "Or what?" I whispered. "You'll hit me? Like you hit Daniel when he mouthed off. Go ahead. Do it. Because at least then you'd stop pretending to be something you're not." The room was thick with silence. His jaw tightened. His knuckles whitened around the glass. For a heartbeat, I thought he might actually swing at me. Instead, he stood. His voice was low, cold. You don't know what you're talking about. But one day you will. And when she betrays you, don't come running to me. He brushed past me, heading upstairs, leaving his glass half full on the table like a marker of victory. I stood there, shaking, staring at the amber liquid, the faint scent of smoke and oak filling my nose until I wanted to vomit. I didn't sleep that night. I sat awake, pacing, my thoughts chasing themselves in circles. Emma said he came onto her. Dad said she came onto him. One of them was lying. Maybe both. But the betrayal, the fracture was already carved into me. By morning, my eyes burned, my head throbbed, and my chest felt hollow. Daniel knocked on my door. You okay? I opened it a crack. He took one look at my face and sighed. He got to you, didn't he? I nodded, too tired to speak. Daniel hesitated, then said something I'll never forget. He did the same thing to Mom years ago. My heart stopped. What? Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. She never told you, but I heard them. He was seeing someone. I was 13. I heard the fights, the crying. She forgave him because she didn't want to break the family. But it never went away. He never changed. He just got better at hiding it. I stumbled back, my legs weak. Everything I thought I knew about my parents, about my family, was a lie. He's poison, Daniel said quietly. Always has been. And now he's trying to drag you down with him. The words hollowed me out even more than the betrayal itself. Because if Daniel was right, if Dad had been doing this for years, then Emma wasn't the first. And she wouldn't be the last. I wanted to confront Mom, demand why she hadn't told us. But when I went downstairs, she was sitting at the table again, staring into another cold cup of tea. Her eyes were bloodshot. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her. When she saw me, she whispered, "I'm sorry." I couldn't even speak. That evening, Emma showed up at our door. My father wasn't home yet. She stood in the doorway, shaking. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. "He won't leave me alone. He keeps calling, showing up. I blocked his number, but he finds ways." I felt the rage crawl back under my skin, hot and choking. "Did he?" I swallowed hard. "Did he hurt you?" Her eyes filled with tears. She didn't answer, and that silence told me more than words ever could. I pulled her inside, sat her on the couch, promised her she was safe here. My hands trembled as I wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, the same way Mom had wrapped me when I was a child with a fever. Emma looked at me with broken eyes. "I didn't want to ruin your family. I thought I could handle it. But he's not going to stop." And in that moment, I knew she was right. My father had already crossed lines. He would keep crossing them until someone forced him to stop. I stared at the front door, my chest burning with a decision I hadn't fully made yet, but felt in my bones. If he walked through that door tonight, I wasn't sure I could stop myself. The sound of his car pulling into the driveway was like thunder. Emma flinched, her whole body tensing under the blanket. My mother's teacup rattled against the saucer as she set it down too fast. Daniel froze at the bottom of the stairs, his face pale. And me, I felt something inside me ignite. The door opened. My father stepped in, loosening his tie, humming under his breath like it was any other night. Then he saw Emma on the couch, saw the blanket around her shoulders, saw the way I stood between them, fists clenched. His humming stopped. "What is this?" he asked, his tone sharp, eyes narrowing. I took a step forward. "This ends tonight." He tilted his head, like I was a toddler throwing a tantrum. "Son, you don't know what you're doing." Emma's voice was a whisper. "Please, stop." Dad's eyes flicked to her, dark and hungry in a way that made my stomach turn. "You shouldn't be here." That was it. That look. That tone. I snapped. Don't talk to her. I roared. The room shook with my voice. My father blinked, surprised for once, like he hadn't expected me to stand up to him. Mom's voice cracked through the tension. Please, both of you don't do this. But I couldn't stop. Not anymore. You're my father, I said, my voice shaking but loud. And you've been chasing after the woman I love. You lied to me. You lied to Mom. You destroyed this family. His jaw tightened. His calm cracked just slightly. Watch yourself. I laughed bitterly. Or what? You'll add me to the list of people you've ruined. Daniel muttered under his breath. Oh, God. But he didn't move. For the first time. Dad's mask slipped. His voice dropped. Low and venomous. You think you know everything. You don't know what kind of woman she is. You don't know what she's capable of. She came on to me. She begged for my attention. Emma gasped. That's a lie. The rage in my chest turned to fire. You're pathetic. I didn't recognize my own voice anymore. It was sharper, colder, like the words had been forged in iron. He stepped forward, close enough that I could smell the whiskey on his breath. Be careful, son. Respect is the only thing standing between you and consequences you don't want. That was the moment. The line in the sand. He expected me to back down the way Mom always had. The way Daniel always had. But I couldn't. Not this time. So I stood taller, met his eyes, and said, Hit me then. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. For a heartbeat, I thought you would. His hand twitched. His jaw clenched. But instead, he did something worse. He smiled. You're weak, he said softly, almost pitying. Just like your mother. The words sliced through the air like a blade. Mum's face crumpled. Daniel swore under his breath. Emma grabbed my arm, as if to keep me from doing something irreversible. But it was too late. I lunged at him. My shoulder slammed into his chest, knocking him back into the wall. The whiskey glass toppled, shattering across the floor. He cursed, shoving me off, stronger than I expected. We stumbled, fists flying, years of silence erupting into violence. Daniel yelled for us to stop. Mom screamed. Emma cried out. But none of it registered. All I saw was him. All I felt was rage. His fist connected with my jaw. The crack echoing through the room. My vision blurred, but I didn't go down. I swung back, catching his cheek, splitting the skin. Blood trickled down his face. You ruined everything. I shouted. He snarled. You think this family was ever whole? You're blind. You've always been blind. We crashed into the coffee table, splintering wood, sending magazines scattering. My chest heaved, my fists raw, my vision swimming. And then, suddenly it was over. Daniel had me in a chokehold, dragging me back. Stop. You're gonna kill each other. Dad stood across the room, chest rising and falling, blood dripping down his cheek, his shirt half untucked. His eyes burned into me with something darker than rage, something closer to hatred. Emma sobbed into her hands. Mum knelt, trembling, picking up pieces of broken glass like her hands needed something to do. The silence that followed was worse than the fight. Dad wiped his face with the back of his hand, smearing blood across his cheek. He pointed at me, his voice steady, almost calm. You'll regret this. Then he grabbed his keys and stormed out. The sound of the door slamming shook the walls. His car roared down the street, leaving only the echo of his threat behind. Emma sat frozen on the couch. Daniel let go of me, his own hands trembling. Mom whispered, What have we done? But I didn't answer. I just stood there, my jaw throbbing, my chest on fire, my mind racing, because the look in his eyes as he left hadn't been defeat. It had been a promise, and I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. The house felt hollow after he left, like the air itself had been drained away. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like footsteps returning. Every shadow stretched too long, too dark. Emma stayed on the couch, wrapped in the blanket like armor. Her eyes darted to the door every few seconds, as if he might come back at any moment. Daniel paced the room, running his hands through his hair. We need to do something. We can't just wait for him to come back. Mum finally spoke, her voice low and broken. You don't know what he's capable of when he's like this. The way she said it chilled me. She wasn't talking about tonight. She was talking about years. Decades. I turned to her. Then why did you stay? Her hands trembled as she set down the glass shards she'd been clutching. Because I thought keeping the family together was better than tearing it apart. I thought I could protect you. Her voice cracked. But I was wrong. Emma whispered, He's not going to stop. And I knew she was right. That night, none of us slept. Daniel sat at the kitchen table like a guard, his eyes fixed on the front door. Mum stayed in the living room, flinching at every sound. I stayed with Emma upstairs, but my body was tense, my ears straining for the sound of his car. It never came. By morning, my phone buzzed with messages. From him, You've made a mistake. Family is blood. Blood doesn't betray blood. You'll see what happens when you choose strangers over your own. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Emma saw them too. Her hands shook as she whispered, You have to go to the police. That he was the police. Not officially anymore, he'd retired last year. But he still had friends, connections, favors. I could already hear the laughter in the station. Domestic squabble. Son angry at his father. Nothing serious. Daniel disagreed. If we don't report this, he'll control the story. That's what he does. Mum shook her head. You don't understand. He'll twist it. He always twists it. He'll make you look unstable, violent. He'll say you attacked him. He's done it before. That last sentence made me freeze. Before? She wouldn't meet my eyes. Mum. Daniel pressed, his voice sharp. What do you mean before? Her silence told us more than words could. The next few days blurred together. We moved through the house like ghosts, waiting. Every car outside made us tense. Every knock on the door sent adrenaline spiking. On the third day he came back. Not storming, not shouting. Calm. Controlled. The front door opened, and there he was, bandage on his cheek, suit pressed, like nothing had happened. Mum gasped. Daniel stood instantly. Emma gripped my arm so hard her nails left marks. Dad set his keys on the counter. We need to talk. No, I said flatly. We're done talking. He smirked. So that's it? You think you can just cut me out? Pretend I don't exist? I built this family. I gave you everything. And this is how you repay me. I stepped forward, my voice low. You betrayed me. You betrayed all of us. His smirk faltered, replaced by something sharper. You don't know betrayal yet. But you will. The tension in the room was unbearable. I could feel Emma trembling beside me. Daniel clenched his fists. And then Dad pulled something from his coat pocket. Not a weapon papers. He tossed them onto the table. Divorce papers, he said calmly. Your mother doesn't want me anymore. Fine. But I won't leave this house with nothing. Half of everything here is mine. And if you try to stand in my way, I'll drag this family through court until you're begging me to stop. Mum's face went pale. You bastard! He ignored her. His eyes locked on me. You think you've won something? All you've done is destroy what's left. I felt the fury rise again. But this time I didn't move. I couldn't. Because I saw the satisfaction in his eyes. He wanted me to snap. He wanted me to lash out so he could claim the role of victim. So I did the only thing I could. I said nothing. His smile widened. That's what I thought. He turned, walking toward the door like a man who still owned the world. But before he stepped outside, He lipped back, his voice low and final. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. The door shut behind him, and the silence he left behind was suffocating. Emma whispered, "He's going to ruin us." And deep down, I knew she was right. Because my father wasn't just a man. He was a storm. And storms don't pass quietly. They destroy everything in their path. He didn't disappear. He multiplied. Within days, it felt like my father was everywhere. His face in the newspaper for a community fundraiser. His voice on the radio, giving interviews about his years of service. His picture on social media, arm around old colleagues, all smiles and handshakes. Meanwhile, whispers started about me. Neighbors who used to wave at me now looked away. Friends stopped replying to texts. At the grocery store, I heard them quiet voices carrying sharp words. Did you hear about his son? The one who attacked him? Such a shame. He raised that boy, gave him everything. And this is how he's repaid. It was happening. He was controlling the story. Daniel slammed his phone onto the table after scrolling through Facebook. He's telling everyone you're violent. That Emma's some manipulative girl who came between father and son. Emma's eyes filled with tears. He's turning people against us. Mum's hands shook as she poured herself a cup of tea she never drank. That's what he does. He twists the truth until you don't know what's real anymore. I wanted to scream. To march into every house on our street and shout the truth until they listened. But Dad was a master storyteller, a decorated ex-officer, a man with decades of respect backing his words. I was just his son, the one he'd painted as unstable. Then came the phone call. It was late. Emma and I were sitting in silence when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. His voice filled my ear. Calm, almost amused. You think you can turn her against me? You think you can take what's mine? My blood turned to ice. She was never yours, he chuckled, low and bitter. You really don't get it, do you? Everything you love, everything you think belongs to you. It's mine. Always has been. I gripped the phone until my knuckles ached. If you come near her again, you'll do what? He cut me off. Hit me again. Try to play the man of the house. His voice darkened. Be careful, son. You're walking a dangerous line. And lines have consequences. He hung up before I could answer. Emma's face was pale when I told her. He's not going to stop, she whispered. I knew she was right. But I also knew something else. If I didn't fight back, he'd win. Daniel agreed. We need proof. Something no one can ignore. He's too good at twisting words, so we give them something solid. Proof of what? I asked, exhausted. Proof of who he really is. Recordings, messages, anything. It sounded impossible. But it was the only chance we had. So we waited. We watched. We collected. Emma saved the texts he sent her, messages dripping with manipulation. Half threats wrapped in charm. Daniel used an old phone to record conversations when Dad showed up at the house unannounced. His voice sharp, cruel, different from the saintly figure he showed the world. Mom even found old emails flirtatious, suggestive, undeniable, buried in his forgotten inbox. Piece by piece, the truth built itself. But Dad wasn't blind. He saw the shift. He felt the resistance. And one night he snapped. We were eating dinner in silence when the front door slammed open. He stormed in, eyes wild, the smell of whiskey thick around him. You think you can betray me? He shouted, slamming his fists onto the table. Plates rattled. Emma jumped. Mom froze. Daniel stood slowly. Leave. Dad's laugh was sharp, jagged. Or what? You'll call the cops. Half of them still owe me favors. You think they'll believe you over me? His eyes landed on me. You've been scheming, collecting scraps. You think you're smart, but you're just a boy playing games you don't understand. I stood too. my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my chest. "We're done being afraid of you." For the first time, something flickered in his eyes' surprise. But it vanished quickly, replaced by cold fury. "You're nothing without me," he spat. "All of you. She leave you. He'll fail. She crumble. And you'll end up alone, just like you deserve." He grabbed the edge of the table, flipped it, sending plates and food crashing to the floor. Mum screamed. Emma clutched my arm. Daniel lunged forward, shoving him back. "Get out." For a moment I thought fists would fly again, but Dad just straightened his jacket, his smile eerie in its calm. "This is your choice," he said softly. "But choices have consequences. Remember that." And then he left, slamming the door so hard the frame cracked. Silence fell again, broken only by Mom's sobs and the sound of Emma's ragged breathing. Daniel looked at me, his face grim. "We don't have time. We take what we've got and we go public, before he destroys us completely." I nodded, my body trembling with both fear and resolve, because I knew one thing. If we didn't end this war soon, my father would, and he wouldn't stop until we were all broken. We didn't sleep that night. None of us. Daniel spread out the evidence on the kitchen table, the texts, the recordings, the emails Mom had dug up. He was meticulous, almost surgical, labeling dates, highlighting phrases, creating a timeline of corruption. Emma sat beside me, her hands trembling as she scrolled through her phone. What if it's not enough? What if they still believe him? I squeezed her hand. "Then we make it enough." Mom's voice broke the silence. "If you do this, there's no going back. He'll never forgive you." I almost laughed. "Forgive me?" "He's the one who—" I stopped, swallowing the fury, burning in my throat. "I don't need his forgiveness. I need him out of our lives." By morning we had a plan. Daniel knew a journalist, an old friend from college who now worked for the local paper. She owed him a favor. We sent her everything. By evening she called back, her voice tense. "This is big. Bigger than you realize. But if I run this story, your father won't just come after me. He'll come after all of you. Are you ready for that?" I looked around the room. Mom's tired eyes, Daniel's grim nod, Emma's trembling resolve. "Yes," I said. "We're ready." The article dropped 2 days later. The headline was brutal. "Respected ex-officer accused of harassment, family manipulation, and abuse." Every detail was laid bare, the text to Emma, the recordings of his threats, the pattern of control and intimidation. It was all there in black and white, undeniable, and the town exploded. Some people were shocked, outraged, disgusted. Others refused to believe it, convinced the man they'd admired for years was the real victim. Social media lit up with debates, half defending him, half condemning him. But one thing was certain. The mask had cracked. Dad's response was immediate. He called me, his voice seething with venom. "You think you've won? You think some article changes anything? You've just made me dangerous. And now everyone pays." The line went dead before I could answer. That night, we doubled the locks. Daniel slept by the door with a baseball bat. Emma curled against me, her body trembling with every creak of the house. Mum stayed awake, staring out the window like she was waiting for him to appear. And then he did. Around midnight, headlights swept across the living room. His car. He didn't get out, just sat there. Engine idling, headlights burning into our home like searchlights. Emma whispered, "Oh my God." Daniel gripped the bat tighter. "He's trying to scare us." It worked. My skin crawled with fear, but I forced myself to stand at the window, staring back at him through the glass. For 10 minutes we stood in that silent standoff. Him in the car, me at the window. Then finally he drove off. But I knew it wasn't over. The next morning the police came. Not to protect us, but to question me. The officer, an old colleague of Dad's, stood stiffly on our porch. "We received a report that you assaulted your father last week." "Care to explain?" My stomach dropped. He'd filed charges. Daniel jumped in. He attacked him. "We've got proof." The officer raised a hand. "Save it for court. For now, we just need your brother to come down to the station." Emma grabbed my arm. "Don't go." But I had no choice. If I ran, I'd look guilty. At the station, the walls felt like they were closing in. The officer asked questions, scribbled notes, his expression unreadable. Every word I spoke felt like it was being twisted, reshaped. When it was over, he leaned back. "You're in a mess, kid. My advice? Drop it. Let this die before it ruins you." I wanted to scream, but I stayed silent. They released me, but the message was clear. My father still had power. When I got home, Daniel's face was grim. "We need to go bigger. Local isn't enough. We take this national." Mum shook her head. "That will destroy him." "Good," I snapped. Emma looked at me. Fear and love tangled in her eyes. "But what if it destroys you too?" Her words hung in the air, heavy and uncheckable, because I knew she was right. Every step forward pulled us deeper into a war one wasn't sure we could survive. And as the night closed in, I felt it the storm gathering. My father wasn't retreating. He was circling, waiting for the moment to strike back. The national story broke faster than I expected. Daniel's journalist friend had connections, and within days, bigger outlets picked it up. Suddenly, our lives weren't just town gossip, they were headlines. Decorated ex-officer accused by own family. Hero cop or hidden predator. Comment sections burned like wildfire. Strangers debated our lives like we were characters in a TV drama. Some called me brave. Others called me ungrateful. Emma was labeled everything from survivor to homewrecker. And Dad? He played his part to perfection. He appeared on a morning talk show, sitting across from a sympathetic host, bandage still on his cheek. His voice cracked at all the right moments. "My son," he said, shaking his head. "He's troubled. Always has been." I tried to guide him, but sometimes love isn't enough. And now he's dragged a good woman, my son's own girlfriend, into his delusions. It breaks my heart. I wanted to throw the remote at the screen. Emma buried her face in her hands. Mom whispered, He's doing it again." Daniel muttered, "He's winning." And for a moment, it felt like he was. But then the messages started. Anonymous emails. Handwritten letters slipped under our door. Voicemails from blocked numbers. People who knew him. Women who'd worked with him. A waitress from a bar he used to frequent. A neighbor who'd moved away years ago. All of them with stories. He cornered me in the back room once. He said no one would believe me if I spoke up. He always had this charm, but underneath it, there was something off. Piece by piece, his mask was crumbling. Not just because of us, but because of everyone he'd stepped on along the way. For the first time, I felt hope. But hope doesn't erase fear. One night, Emma and I were heading home when we noticed a car trailing us. Headlights too close, turn for turn, mile after mile. My chest tightened. "That's him," Emma whispered. I sped up. The car sped up. I turned down side streets. It followed. Finally, I pulled into a gas station, heart pounding. The car slowed, idled at the curb, and then drove off. But the message was clear. He was watching. Always watching. When we got home, Daniel was waiting with a grim face. "We can't stay here. He knows every inch of this house. He knows our routines. If he wants to corner us, he will." Mum looked around the kitchen, her voice breaking. "This is our home. I built my life here." I wanted to tell her home wasn't walls. It was safety. And we didn't have that anymore. The decision was made for us 2 nights later. We woke to the sound of shattering glass. A brick, thrown through the living room window. Attached to it, a note scrawled in jagged letters. Traitors don't get second chances. Emma screamed. Mom collapsed against the wall. Daniel grabbed the bat and ran outside, but the street was empty. Just the echo of our fear left behind. We called the police. They took a report, nodded sympathetically, promised to look into it. But I saw it in their eyes, they weren't going to help us. Not against him. That night, Emma whispered into the dark. What if he really kills us? And I couldn't answer, because I didn't know. Days blurred into each other. Interviews. Court dates. The weight of public opinion pressing down on us. And then something unexpected. One of the women who'd reached out agreed to go public. A former colleague of his from the force. She told her story on live TV. How he'd harassed her for years. How complaints had been buried. How she'd been threatened into silence. Her bravery opened the floodgates. More women came forward. More stories spilled out. The perfect image he built for decades cracked wide open. For the first time, it wasn't just me against him. But victory came at a price. The more the walls closed in on him, the more dangerous he became. We started finding dead animals on our porch. Our tires slashed. Anonymous calls in the middle of the night. And then, one evening, as Emma and I walked out of the grocery store, he was there, leaning against his car, arms crossed, eyes locked on us. Emma froze, her hand crushing mine. My blood turned to ice. He smiled, slow, cold. Enjoying your little victory? He said softly, just loud enough for us to hear. It won't last. I wanted to charge at him, to end it right there. But something in his eyes stopped me. A glint I'd never seen before. Something past anger, past rage, something dangerous. We got in the car and drove off. But I couldn't shake the image of his smile burned into my mind. That night, I told Daniel, he's not going to let this end in a courtroom. He wants to end it his way. Daniel's jaw tightened. Then we have to be ready, because I knew now this wouldn't end with headlines or judges or public opinion. It would end with him, and one of us wasn't walking away. The breaking point came on a stormy night. Thunder rattled the windows. Rain lashed against the house in sheets, and every flicker of lightning made Emma flinch. Daniel had the bat propped against his chair, his eyes locked on the front door. Mum sat silently, wringing her hands. Something in the air felt different. Heavy. Charged. Like the storm outside wasn't the only one about to break. Around midnight, the power went out. The house plunged into darkness. Emma gasped. Mum whispered, "Oh God." Daniel grabbed a flashlight, but before he could turn it on, we heard it. Footsteps on the porch. Deliberate. My pulse hammered in my ears. I motioned for everyone to stay quiet, creeping toward the window. Lightning lit up the yard for a split second, just enough to see him standing there. My father, soaked to the bone, eyes glinting in the stormlight. A silhouette of menace. Emma's hand clutched my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "He's here," she whispered, barely audible over the rain. The doorknob rattled. Daniel raised the bat, his knuckles white. Mum stifled a sob, opened the door. Dad's voice called out, "Calm, too calm. We need to talk." I shouted back, "Leave us alone." Silence, then a low chuckle. "You really think a door can keep me out?" The sound of metal scraping, he had something. A crowbar. The wood groaned as he pried at the lock. Emma whimpered. Daniel moved closer, ready to swing. My chest burned with terror and rage. Lightning flashed again, and I saw his face wild, twisted, nothing left of the man I used to know. I grabbed the gun Daniel had stashed in the drawer, my hands shaking as I loaded it. Emma's eyes widened. "You can't." "I have to," I whispered. "He won't stop." The door splintered, the deadbolt straining. My father's voice roared through the storm. "You think you can destroy me? I am this family. With a final crack, the door gave way. He stepped inside, crowbar in one hand, rain dripping from his clothes, eyes locked on me. The storm howled around us, but the room was silent, the air thick with the inevitability of what was about to happen. He smiled. Go ahead. Be the man you think you are. Pull the trigger. Daniel stepped forward, bat raised. Stay back. Dad swung the crowbar, catching Daniel across the arm. Daniel screamed, dropping the bat. Mom shrieked. Emma clung to me. I raised the gun, my hands trembling so hard I could barely aim. Put it down, Dad sneered, advancing. You don't have it in you. You're still that scared little boy who worshipped me. Every memory of him flooded back. Teaching me to ride a bike, holding my hand on the first day of school, laughing with me over fishing trips. Then the lies, the manipulation, the betrayal. The man in front of me wasn't my father anymore. He was a predator wearing my father's face. I tightened my grip. Stay where you are. He took another step. Do it then. Show them who you really are. Time slowed. Rain drummed on the roof like a heartbeat. Emma's sobs were muffled against my shoulder. Daniel groaned on the floor. Mum whispered prayers under her breath, and I pulled the trigger. The sound was deafening. My ears rang. My arms shook from the recoil. Dad staggered back, eyes wide with shock, hand pressed to his side. Blood bloomed across his shirt, dark and spreading. For a moment, silence. Then he laughed, choked, bitter, but a laugh all the same. My boy, he rasped. You finally became me. He collapsed, the crowbar clattering to the floor. Emma screamed. Mum rushed to him, hands trembling as she pressed against the wound. Daniel crawled closer, his face pale. I stood frozen, the gun still in my hands, the storm raging outside. My father lay bleeding at my feet, and all I could hear were his last words echoing in my skull. You finally became me. Sirens wailed in the distance. Neighbors must have heard the shot. The flashing red and blue lights cut through the storm minutes later. Officers stormed in, weapons raised, shouting commands. I dropped the gun instantly, raising my hands. Emma clung to me, sobbing. Daniel shouted for help. Mum screamed that they had to save him. Paramedics rushed in, hauling him onto a stretcher, blood soaking through the sheets. One of the officers looked at me with wary eyes. What happened here? I opened my mouth, but no words came, because I didn't know what had just happened. Had I saved us? Or had I damned myself forever? The hours after the shooting blurred together like a fever dream. The police separated us immediately. Emma in one room, Daniel in another, Mum in another. I was left sitting alone under the harsh fluorescent lights of an interrogation room. The metal chair was cold beneath me. My hand shook, though I couldn't tell if it was fear, adrenaline, or the ghost of pulling that trigger. When the detective finally came in, he didn't waste time. Your father's in critical condition, he said flatly, flipping open his notepad. If he doesn't make it, this is a homicide investigation. So tell me, why did you shoot him? I stared at the scratched surface of the table, my throat dry. Because he was going to kill us. The detective leaned back, crowbar against a gun. You could have backed away. Called us. I laughed bitterly. Called you? Half this town worships him. You would have shown up and shaken his hand. For a moment the detective's expression softened. Just a flicker. Then it was gone. He scribbled something down. We'll see what the DA says. They kept me for 12 hours. Questions. Statements. Forms. By the time they finally let me go, the sun was rising, bleeding pale light through the rain-soaked sky. Emma was waiting outside the station. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but she ran into my arms like I was the only anchor she had left. They said he might not make it, she whispered. I closed my eyes, guilt clawing at my chest. I'd wanted him gone. I'd wanted him stopped. But staring down the possibility of him dying by my hand, it hollowed me out in a way I hadn't expected. When we got home, Daniel was there, his arm bandaged from the crowbar strike. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. Not approval, not judgment, just acknowledgement. Mum was upstairs, lying in bed, her face turned toward the wall. When I tried to talk to her, you whispered, "You've destroyed him." The words cut deeper than any wound, but I couldn't tell if she meant him or me. Days passed. The hospital updates came in waves. First he was stable, then critical again, then stable. The uncertainty gnawed at us. Every phone call a coin flip between life and death. The media swarmed. Headlines screamed about the fallen hero, the family betrayal, the troubled son. Strangers online tore me apart or hailed me as brave. I stopped reading altogether, and then 1 week later the call came. He was gone. The world tilted. I dropped the phone. Emma caught it before it hit the floor, her hand covering her mouth, eyes wide. Daniel sat down heavily, staring at the wall. Mom's scream echoed through the house like glass shattering. My father was dead, and I was the one who killed him. The funeral was chaos. Half the town showed up, dressed in black, singing his praises, telling stories of his heroism, his kindness, his charm. The other half whispered in corners, eyes flicking toward me and Emma. I stood there in silence, numb, as his casket was lowered into the ground. Mom clutched my arm but wouldn't look at me. Daniel stood on the other side, jaw clenched, eyes wet. Emma's hand trembled in mine, and all I could hear were his last words. "You finally became me." The trial dragged on for months. They called it manslaughter. Self-defense complicated by family ties. The recordings, the texts, the testimonies helped. Emma's voice broke on the stand as she described his harassment. Daniel testified about the crowbar. Even Mum, reluctantly, admitted he'd been violent. In the end, the jury spared me prison, probation, community service, mandatory counseling, a second chance, but no sentence could erase the truth. I had killed my father. Life after felt hollow. People treated me like a ghost, some avoided me. Others stared too long. Friends disappeared. Jobs turned me away quietly after background checks. Emma stayed, but I saw the cracks in her smile, the way her eyes lingered on me when she thought I wasn't looking. One night she whispered, "You did what you had to do." But I heard the unspoken part, and I'll never forget it. Daniel moved out of town. Mom sold the house. I stayed behind, wandering the ruins of a life that had once felt whole. Sometimes I wake in the middle of the night, convinced I hear his voice. Sometimes I catch my reflection in the mirror and see him in my eyes, my jaw, my clenched fists. Maybe that's the final cruelty, that no matter how hard I try to escape him, a part of him will always live in me. But I also know this. His story ended with violence. Mine doesn't have to. The day I pulled that trigger was the day I stopped being his son and started being something else. Not him. Not anymore. Because betrayal doesn't just destroy, it transforms. And I'll spend the rest of my life making sure I never become the man I killed. That was the day I stopped recognizing who I was.